psychological trauma of the enslavement period, the role of the church in healing the psychological trauma of the enslavement period, which has lasted into today. We're very happy to welcome for the first time Dr. Eugenia K. Griffin. God bless you, my sister.
God bless you. Good morning, Brother Leroy.
Thank you very much for joining us. And when we mentioned that particular subject, you said, I get right into it. The role of the church in healing the psychological damage done by the enslavement period. And we're looking at not during the enslavement period, but right now, during that period and on through. So what have you seen? What have you uncovered? What have you observed in that regards?
Well, one of the things I would like to say is that the church is a place of refuge, a place of support for the community. One of the things that I see in my own place of worship is we address issues that are above and beyond just focusing on individuals' connection with a higher power, their relationship with God. We actually address community issues like education, disparities, inequality in housing. And as it relates to the psychological or the psychotrauma related to our history of enslavement, I feel that the church in particular should be a hub where we have that discussion, not only as it relates to our historical experiences, but just as being persons of color in America in 2014. We still see a disparity in how we're treated within the community, disparities within healthcare, disparities within how our educational system educates our young children, and particularly our males. And those types of topics need to be just as much of a foci in the church as our spiritual needs.
The inclusion of those kind of topics in areas of discussion is as much as I would like to see it. I know that there are churches that resist doing that. What makes your church? There's St. Paul's Community Baptist Church in Brooklyn, right?
Correct.
Yeah, what makes that so unique? When I say so unique, that they would encompass those type of topics, and what has that led to? Has that been good for the spiritual growth and development? Your observations?
Well, I would say one of the reasons why it's done is because our leadership realizes how important it is. And I'm wondering if there's a skew in the realization and how this is a necessity. If you look at historical factors, granted, I wasn't born in the 60s. I'm only 34. But when I do research and look at the movements of the civil rights pieces, that came from out of the church. And it's almost as if we have amnesia with our history. So I would have to say that my leadership in which I'm under, they realize the importance of it, the necessity for it as being part of just growth, development, and spirituality. From a spiritual perspective, we are each other's keeper. We should not have an individualistic orientation, but more communal. So in the sense of that, if one of our school systems is not functioning, whether or not we have children, it should be where it affects us all. And I realize that our leadership, they realize that. Has it worked? Yes. You have individuals, particularly our brothers, our black men, realizing their importance within the community, realizing their importance within the family, realizing their importance within the youth. You have women who now realize their place as well, and you have a community of people who realize the importance of their voice with regard to voting, with regard to holding public officials, elected officials accountable for making sure that we receive equitable services. So yes, it is working.
I'm listening to your answer, and I'm seeing what I've seen at St. Paul's Community Baptist Church, and what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that the information takes on the form of knowledge because of the various kind of speakers, whether they're preachers, revival preachers, or the Ma'afa events that are held there, that this information creates a knowing in the congregation, and in knowing there is greater responsibility and awareness that, quote, we can begin to solve some of our own problems as a...
Absolutely.
Go ahead. You keyed in on that. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Once I realized, being a person who attended the church since I was 14 years old, it kind of shaped my own passion and career when Pastor Johnny Ray Youngblood was still our pastor. I remember being exposed to, in our youth ministry classes, that talked about different systemic structures and how that influences our services within our community. And that really shaped my dissertation and just all of my graduate school research. That led me into really looking at the impact of racial stress on cardiovascular disease, the impact of racial stress on coping responses. So it's very influential. Once I feel people are exposed to education, exposed to knowledge that makes them think, then you do see positive outcomes. People wanting to fight to have equitable services and equality just across different domains.
Explore that cardiovascular piece for us. The as it relates to the enslavement, or my term, white supremacy is a system, and that is the environment in which we are in. And racism has been used as a synonym to white supremacy, but white supremacy practiced by those sick individuals who do practice it and implement it and fortify it, that creates certain reactions in the black person. The cardiovascular and the stress part, play that out for us.
So basically what that means is that when persons, based on my research, from undergrad to grad school, my research supported that when persons of color, particularly black, which I study, when we're exposed to a racial stressor, so being exposed to some type of discrimination, whether it's perceived or actual experience, that we begin to see elevations in things like your galvanic skin responses, so heat conductance. You begin to see elevations in heart rate and blood pressure readings. Now, what happens as it relates to CVD, cardiovascular disease, is that when that exposure is chronic, experienced every day, now again, whether or not it's perceived or actual, has the same response. It places persons at risk for hypertension. So elevated blood pressure readings every day, a chronic stressor as racial stress, was said to equate to making persons susceptible for CVD.
Now, add to that, let's add to that, and I don't know whether your research covered this or not at this point in time. The enslavement period was not only a mental and physical and spiritual attack on black people, but within that component is the imposing of a diet that is foreign to the black person. What have you found correlating? When I say correlating, adding to that cardiovascular, adding to the stress, etc.
That you do see, and I don't think it's really tailored to a race issue, but if you wanted to tie diet into one being susceptible to CVD, cardiovascular disease, then it becomes more of looking at mental health outcomes, like, say, for instance, a depression, where sometimes you find people who have comfort food. So a depressed affect as a result of being exposed to chronic racial stimuli could onset emotional eating as it relates to more of a depressive symptoms, and that too could be associated with obesity and or cardiovascular disease or even diabetes, and may lend support as to why you see a disparity in those types of physical health outcomes.
Now, here's an interesting situation for me, and that is that a person suffering from rejection in the system or being deprived, let's say there are three things that are happening within the American society right now. Three things that I'm aware of. Section 8 has been cut, but yet they're giving billions of dollars to the Ukraine. Section 8 has been cut. Unemployment, the extended unemployment piece has been cut or suspended, and food stamps have been cut. Now, that is part of a system that's cloaked as you in your book. You talk about covert and overt racism. And when you look at the covert thing, it's done in such a way that you think it's justifiable. And so when they cut food stamps and when they cut Section 8 and when they cut the unemployment, the code phrases that are used are synonymous with stereotypes of black people. The more money you give them, the more they'll stay away from work. And this guy, this congressman, repeated some of that a week and a half ago. But my point is that it's cloaked. But here's a person who's been deprived of those three elements: Section 8, food stamps, and unemployment, extended unemployment. They are going through stress, but they don't know that it's coming from the system of white supremacy. And what would that knowledge do if you could convince them or share that information? What would that knowledge do to the stress factor that they're suffering?
Well, knowledge of any sort influences persons engaging in more adaptive behaviors. So say, for instance, if persons knew what covert racism was actually entailed versus it maintaining ambiguity, it would decrease some of the physiological outcomes that we see, possibly. However, there's the piece whether or not people would actually work to address it. The difference from just knowing versus knowing coupled with doing. So if people know the information and know how covert racism impacts their day-to-day living as it is for 2014 and beyond, that's one thing. But if they know it and actually do something adaptive to counter it, that piece there, the latter, would aid in reducing potential health outcomes that we see.
Well, let's play this one out real quick. That I perceive, let's say I'm a target of those three elements: the deprival of food stamps and Section 8 and the long-term unemployment insurance. That when I see that it is something that is within the possibility of realm of white supremacy, I will respond to it differently as opposed to they're telling me that there's no budget. I think that I don't know what I would do. Maybe I'd get on the phone and call my congressman. Maybe I would have a different energy in approaching and using that information. But it would definitely have a different impact on my mind from helplessness to, that is the source of this thing once again is playing out. Go to the church. Go to what you have seen as being the healing qualities of attending church, whether one is Christian or whatever, but one lives in the neighborhood, one is in the society, and what have you seen?
Well, again, in my own personal experiences, I've seen that when knowledge is there, and particularly leadership has a idea of how to respond in a positive, not that you want people to be just aggressive with like violent acts, but aggressive in a sense that you know who are the gatekeepers that need to be contacted to address that? And that's what I see in my leadership, and I admire it and appreciate it greatly, because there are things that may not necessarily affect me, but may affect the generations that come behind me. And I realize that leadership is looking at, okay, this is what it is. This is the antecedent to the hardship experience and this outcome. And these are the people that we need to talk to. And they're meeting with them. They're developing strategies on, again, how to counter these issues. And not only them, but the persons within that congregation are coming out and being supportive. So our leadership is not just out there meeting alone, but you have a body of people who are standing in support to say, hey, we understand what's going on, and this is the changes that we need to be made. So again, once knowledge is there, and in a community of color, again, from history to present, the church has been a source of not only information but community change, and that needs to remain as just as much as we need food and water.
I want you to comment on things that I have observed, and not through study in terms of doing deep research, but my observations is that the singing that occurs in the church plays a role in healing. Some of the messages that are delivered from the scripture plays a role, and the community, the fact that people are gathered together, quote, with the same mind, has an element in healing. What is your comments? And I'm going back to slavery days up to today. What are your observations? What are your comments?
Okay, that's an interesting question. And I would say that, Brother Leroy, historically, and again, I'm still a junior compared to what some have experienced, but historically what I've noticed is that, yes, songs have messages, but songs also ignited energies to make people want to work. Now, maybe and I talk about this in my first book, Letter to the Black Community, from the civil rights movement, once we started getting those there were three different opportunities that were really influential during that time. It's almost as if people forgot what they needed to do to implement community change. And now that I'm back home, I'm done with school and back in my own place of worship, I'm realizing that those songs that we sing, because I'm part of the praise team at my place of worship, that they ignite a certain type of energy. And that's part of the reason why I do what I do, from being a practitioner and also being an educator, is that those songs inspire me. If the Lord is Lord and He is like my rock and my strength, that when faced with adversity, not only for myself but for my community, I should want to take a stand. Because God is about love of not just me, but about all people.
Exactly.
People who look like me, people who don't look like me. And again, it goes back to, if I'm affected or you're affected, then we're affected. God is about community. He's not about selfish individualism. So when I sing those songs, part of it, I feel that He blessed me to become a doctor so young, not just because of something special about me, but because I can make a difference. And what I'm doing is I started a mentoring program, because I realized that people who look like me and come from communities like mine, they don't have anyone like myself to look up to, and most of them will be first-generational college students. And those songs inspire me to want to give back to my community.
The book is Letters to the Black Community. Our guest online is Dr. Eugenia K. Griffin, and she's in Brooklyn, USA. She's a professor at a college in the CUNY system, and she's with us. And as you can hear, she has some knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. We're going to take one call because of our time. God bless you. Your question, please.
Yes, can she give an address and a phone number to where she could be contacted, and an address to a phone number to Johnny Ray Youngblood's church?
All right. Thank you, sir. Contact information for Johnny Youngblood's church, and also how people can communicate with you. You can either give a phone number or you can give a email address. That's up to you.
Okay, I'll give my business number. It's 718-802-8965. I also have a website. It's www.tx, as in Xerox, the number 4, creatingchange.com. And Pastor Johnny Ray Youngblood is the pastor emeritus of my church, but St. Paul is located at 859 Hendricks Avenue between Stanley and Linden, Brooklyn, New York.
One of the things in terms of a church being active and dealing with communal issues is that eventually it begins to attract people there who don't belong to the church or who are not members of the church, but still they come for solutions to their problems. And eventually they join. And what happens is that as that congregation grows, the politicians in the area begin to pay attention because that particular congregation represents potential of so many votes.
Absolutely.
And that has an impact. So for the audience, I'm always recommending we go to church or join the Masons or join the Eastern Star, become a very active participant in various groups in your community, and you build your leadership potential, or you increase your leadership potential and also the potential of your community. What are some recommendations that you would share with us in terms of guiding our children into a spiritual environment, whether it's a church, a mosque, a masjid, a temple? What would your advice be in that regards? What would your general advice be to the community based on the challenges that you see?
For our young people, I would say connect yourself with persons or organizations, whether it's like you said, a church, a mosque, who are making a difference in the community. And a group or organization that is not just talking about one phenomenon, but out there in the community speaking about everyday issues that impact where you live and abroad. I forgot your second question. I'm sorry.
The recommendations that you would make to the community as a whole.
The community at large?
Yes.
I think in 2014, we still need to wake up and realize that things are not just. There's still disparities, inequalities. I don't care if you live in Long Island. I don't care if you live in specific parts of Queens. We as persons of color still need to do much work. And not just much work as an individual, but much work as a community. Again, if one person is at a disadvantage, then at the end of the day, it places us all at a disadvantage. And we really need to come back and restore our communal energies and realize that we have community issues that need to be addressed, not just for our young people, but also for our seniors as well.
Dr. Eugenia Griffin is our guest and has been our guest this morning. Letters to the Black Community. It's a series of letters addressing various segments of our community and recommendations within those letters. We recommend that you make contact with Dr. Eugenia Griffin, 718-802-8965, 718-802-8965. My sister, thank you very much for joining us this morning. May God continue to bless you and your family.
Oh, thank you so much, Brother Leroy. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Peace.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Also, be sure you get the black newspapers into your home. The final call this week deals with saving black young girls, Saving Black Sisters, and there are articles in there on the suspension of black children. And hey, it's up to you. Get the information, use it, and may God continue to bless you and your family. Sister Nellie Bailey on tonight at 6. Stay tuned for more cultural mix here at WHCR.
You're listening to WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
¡Caché! Tengo que decirte, vida mía, que lo nuestro es imposible cada día. Aunque te quiera más a cada instante, porque eres buena mujer, muy buena amante. Aunque perteneces a otro hombre, yo te amo, tú sabes dónde.